So the next topic we're going to talk about is simplifying a sum or difference of two univariate polynomials. So just as a reminder, sum means that we are going to add, difference means that we are going to subtract. So basically what we're going to do here is we're going to take two polynomials now and we're going to add them together or subtract them. Now, when we're adding, it tends to be a lot easier because all we have to do when we're adding is get rid of our parentheses. And I want to explain to you why that is. So if you had something in front of the parentheses like this, basically you would have a +1 there, right? Because if there was a number in front of it, you would take that number and distribute it. But because there's not one and just a plus sign, you're going to take a +1 and multiply it to all three of these terms. Now, when you do that, it's not really going to change anything. Basically, it's going to be the same polynomial, just with the parentheses gone. I didn't have anything to distribute to the first polynomial, so I just took those parentheses off. There was nothing out in front, so the parentheses were pretty much useless. Now, once you do that, you end up with this, a big long polynomial. When it says simplify, what we want you to do is we want you to take two things that have like terms and combine them together. So 7v to the second power and 6v to the second power, when you add those up, you would get 13v to the second power. Now, something interesting happens here with the v term because we have 4v and we have -4v. When you combine those together, they end up canceling out. 4v and -4v are opposites, so they cancel each other out. The last term you have here is your -2 and your -3. When you combine those two things together, you get -5. And this would be your final answer. So if you take a look at this whole mess right here, when you simplify it, it simplifies down to this. Now, one thing you want to make sure of when you have it simplified, you never want to have two things or two terms that are the same. So you never want to have a v squared and a v squared. You never want to have a v and a v. You want to combine those if they have the same degree and the same variable. If they're not the same and you can't combine like terms, this would be your final answer here. One thing you do not want to do is you do not want to turn this into 8v squared. It is not that. You cannot subtract 13v squared minus 5. This is your final answer. This is not correct. Here's another one, very similar. Once again, we've got a +1 here. So all we have to do is drop the parentheses for the first one. And then for the second one, we are going to distribute this +1. When we distribute a +1 here, again, nothing changes. One thing to be careful of here is that when you have a negative in front on the inside, you want to make sure you take that into account. It is adding, but it's adding a negative. So when we add a negative, what we're going to do is subtract. That minus sign doesn't have any effect on these two terms. It's only attached to this 3. So once you do that, now you can just combine like terms like we did in the past. So combine 5v squared and 3v squared. Combine those two terms together, you're going to get 2v squared. Keep in mind you have to have that sign in front. Don't forget about this negative sign right there. A lot of people forget about that. I understand it, but try to train yourself to make sure you're keeping that sign attached to whatever term you have. The next terms that you're going to have to combine are -7v and +6v. When you combine those together, -7 plus 6, that's -1. So that would just be -1v or just -v. The last one you got here, you've got a +4 and you've got a +1. When you add those up, you get a +5. So this would be your final answer. Another thing to check is to make sure that you have no like terms to combine. None of these three terms are like terms, which means this is your final answer. Now, when you have a subtraction or a difference, so to speak, there is one thing that makes this a little bit more complicated. Just like in the first two, we're going to take that first set of parentheses and we're going to get rid of them. We do not need the first set of parentheses. But now, when we distribute this number in front, this is a negative 1. So what's going to happen is we're going to take that negative 1 and distribute it to every term on the inside. So 6v squared turns into negative 6v squared. 4v turns into negative 4v. And negative 1 times 1 is just negative 1. Notice I had plus, plus, plus in the middle of the parentheses here. When I distribute the negative, it turns into minus, minus, minus. Once you've done that, it's just like these previous two problems. Now we are just combining like terms. Like I said, the only difference is that now we have to distribute a negative if there's a minus sign in the middle. So we've got 2v squared, we've got negative 6v squared. 2 minus 6 is negative 4v squared. The second term, we've got 7v and negative 4v. 7 minus 4, that's 3. And then the last one, we've got plus 5 and minus 1. Plus 5 and a minus 1 combined to give you a positive 4. So this is your final answer. Once again, no like terms, so don't combine them all together. You cannot add any of these things together because they do not have the same variable or the same exponent. Last one, I wanted to throw this one here because just because there's one thing missing. If you notice, this first set of parentheses does not have a t squared term. So I've got 7t minus 1. This first set of parentheses can go away. But now, once again, I'm going to distribute a negative 1 to all three of these terms. So I take negative 1 times 6t squared. That's negative 6t squared. Negative 1 times negative 5t. That turns into a plus 5t. And the last one, negative 1 times negative 1. That turns into plus 1. Now, simplifying this here, you notice something that's a little bit different, and that's that there's only one term that has a t squared in it. So because this is the only term that has a t squared in it, we don't need to combine that with anything. We can just leave that on its own. So that first term, you've got nothing to combine it with, so we just leave it as negative 6t squared. Then we've got a 7t here and a 5t. They're both positive, which means we're going to add them together, and we're going to get plus 12t. And in the last set of terms here, we have a minus 1. Sorry about that. We have a minus 1 and a plus 1. And as you could guess, these two things then would simply cancel each other out. So this would be your final answer here, negative 6t squared plus 12t. These are not like terms, so you cannot combine these. This has a 2, this does not, which means they are not alike. So this is your final answer.